We're all born with a copy of the most complex and remarkable structure in the universe. Weighing just 1.4 kilos, the human brain is a collection of 86 billion cells. All of our thoughts, personality, consciousness, and intelligence are emergent properties of the 5,000 trillion connections that these cells make with each other, known as synapses. By comparison, the world's most powerful supercomputer, consisting of 700,000 processors, 1.5 million gigabytes of memory, and requiring enough electricity to power 10,000 homes, would take 40 minutes to simulate just 1 second of 1% of the brain's activity. The brain does this all the time on about 20 watts of power, which is barely enough to power a light bulb. What should be obvious from this is that the brain is not as analogous to a computer as we might like to think. Living in the digital age, it's easy to believe that the brain is a kind of recording device, and that as students, if we sit in front of something for long enough and stare at it, the information will be taken in and stored somewhere in this organic hard drive so that we can access it later. It's this belief that has led to the fire hose paradigm of education, which now infiltrates all areas from school right through to university. We believe that if we sit in front of things long enough, it will go in. We know that this fails some students, those who fall behind the conveyor belt that only moves at one speed, drop out or give up on formal education altogether. However, to an extent, it fails us all, because it stops us from reaching our true potential. It stops us from reaching our true potential because no one can keep up on the same speed on the same conveyor belt. The way that we're practicing education has to change, because not every person can keep up on the same speed. Omair and I have been working really hard over the last few years. During our own time as medical students, we stumbled across an idea that has helped us dramatically through our own studies, and we've been working on it, and I'll let Omair tell you a bit more about it.
Thank you, James. So, in order to mass teach thousands of students, the current education system relies primarily upon unloading material for us students to passively consume. We reread textbooks over and over again in the hopes that some of the information will stick. Well, this method is not only time-consuming and monotonous, but it's hilariously ineffective. And this becomes apparent as the volume of information on your syllabus increases. Now, this is actually true for the different types of passive learning methods that there are. This includes reading textbooks and sitting in lecture theatres. When you compare that to more active methods of learning, such as group discussions and practical demonstrations, and teaching others, well, the outcomes result in far longer and more apparent memory. So, how do you take passive methods of learning and make them more engaging? Well, in our studies, James and I started sifting through our textbooks, our lecture notes and our online learning material, and we began writing quizzes, and we began writing questions to challenge each other. This required us to put our thinking hats on and our teaching hats on, but it also introduced a fun social element to what was previously a dull and socially isolating activity. We then began sharing this method of learning with our peers, and eventually we evolved it into an online website called Synap. This website allowed students to create, practice and share quizzes with their friends. Within weeks, we had tens of thousands of people flocking to the website to benefit from active learning. This included doctors, nurses, lawyers and engineers, accountants, airline pilots, firefighters, martial arts experts. I could go on forever. So we knew we were onto something, we didn't know why. This is when we decided to dive into the world of neuroscience and the research behind how learning takes place in our brains. And what we found was not only eye-opening, but it simultaneously showed to us why our platform was so popular, but more importantly, why so many of us feel left behind in the current education system. The act of picking out questions from a piece of text requires active engagement. It requires students to build a mental image, a mental model of the ideas and concepts that you're trying to assimilate. And it allows you and your brain to process that. It allows you to surface any gaps in your knowledge before that crucial exam or before you have to apply it in the real world. Now, this requires a lot of mental effort, which in turn, it requires a lot of motivation, which obviously not all of us can always have. So when you introduce the social reward of sharing your work and our innate sense of competition, or you're left with an activity that's no longer a chore. As we went deeper into our research into how this learning takes place, we came across an idea by a British philosopher in the 1930s called Professor Mace, who put forward a formula to predict how long before an individual forgets an item of knowledge that they've just learned. A few decades after that, this idea was taken forward and a concept called spaced repetition was born. To explain this, let me put a picture in your mind. Students, when they want to ensure that they haven't forgotten that new topic that they've learned, they go through it over and over again at random points in time in the hopes that they don't forget it when they need to remember it. Well, this concept of spaced repetition, it takes away that randomness so that you don't do it when you don't need to. It ensures that you recall the information just before you forget it, and doing it at that critical point in time increases the number of synaptic connections in your brain to that piece of information so that it's easier to recall in the future. Well, you're probably wondering at this point in time, how can a mathematical formula predict when I'm going to forget an item of knowledge? I mean, I'm different to everyone else, and you'd be right to hold that reservation, because the formula was made as a line of best fit. It was supposed to work for most of you, but not for everyone. And that's why with Synap, we took this idea of spaced repetition and this formula, and we molded it into something a lot more personal. And we did this with the help of artificial intelligence. That's quite a big topic in itself, but if I put it simply, our platform monitors every single individual separately. We monitor how they perform over time and how well they do, and we adjust their study schedule based on their performance. In other words, it's your very own personal study trainer. So what I've described is a fairly simple platform. All it does is allows you to create quizzes, practice them in short bursts, and share it with your friends. But the reason why a simple system of learning works so well and why it's so popular right now, and why it's being used by so many people all over the world, is because it works with your brain, and it doesn't work against it. It learns when you're most engaged, it learns when you're most active, most focused, and when you perform the best in the practices that you do on the website. And it targets those times of day just to make sure that you don't waste your busy schedule. So where do we go from there? I'll pass it back to James.
Thank you. The current educational model fails students because it blasts them with information. We know that our short-term memory is incredibly inefficient compared to our short or long-term memory. Short-term memory, we can hold maybe 5 to 7 pieces of information at one time. We have a concentration span of about 5 minutes, and we forget 90% of what we've been told very shortly after. Conversely, the long-term storage potential of the human brain is virtually limitless. And we know that the people who've achieved mastery in their fields throughout the ages, people like Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, have done so not by memorizing as many things as possible, but by deep, meaningful engagement with their topics that allows them to build detailed mental models of what they're doing and call upon it to develop new ideas and innovate. What's particularly disheartening about the current educational model is that we live in an age of truly unparalleled access to information. We can all access pretty much every piece of knowledge that we've discovered so far from our phones, and we have a better understanding of how the brain works. Whereas in the past, mastery was seen as a sort of rarefied gift that was only achievable by a few great people, with a modern underpinning of how the brain works and an educational framework that's grounded in that reality, there's every reason to believe that such mastery and the resulting artistic, scientific and technological breakthroughs that come with it is something that could be achieved by millions and not just hundreds of people. Synap is something that we've been working on. We came to rely on it during our own studies, and it's something that takes passive learning methods and makes them active, makes them sociable so that students can engage with them. It's something that we've certainly benefited from, it's something that other people are now benefiting from, and it's part of a larger movement of people taking control of their own education and using it to better themselves in their fields. We hope you come and join us. Thank you.